Hey everybody, it is me. Welcome back, your host, Keita, and the founder of the Bryson Holman Foundation. Thank you for joining our podcast, Becoming a Better You, where we talk about the real. We're going to talk about it. Okay. I'm so glad that you guys decided to join me today. Thank you to everyone who interacted with episode one, everyone who reached out, everyone who commented, for everybody who shared. I appreciate the love so much. Before we get started with anything, I need you to do me a favor and go ahead and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at the Bryson Holman Foundation. You can also follow us on TikTok if you really like the reels at Keita B.A.B.Y, which might be changing to TBHF podcast. Um, if you got that out the way, all right, let's move on to the next thing. If you want to be a part of our podcast, you want to be a special guest, you have a story that you want to tell, you have a topic that you would like us to discuss, go ahead and contact me at the Bryson Holman Foundation at gmail.com. I do respond pretty fast. If it's easier for you to reach out to me via inbox, that is fine. But I will also still need your email because business is done through this email. Okay. Also, if you just want to be a blessing to the foundation, we are still in the process of getting our 501c done, and you want to donate, you can on Cash App at Pretty Girls Worship with the U. Pretty Girls Worship. I know I'm working on changing the name, but for right now, it's still that. And I appreciate everything that anybody has done to help this become a success. Now that we got that all out the way, I need you to go get something to drink, get your food, and let's get started. Um, so this is part two to episode one of How Did We Get Here? And I have to be honest with y'all because this is all about honesty. I am having a hard time doing today's live stream. Um, One, because obviously it's been 8 years, and some details of how I felt in the moment, or some things that may have been a minute uh, detail, everything plays in my head as if it was that day. And so I try really hard to not, just give y'all every play for play, but get to the meat of the story. So forgive me if at times there's a pause or something like that, you know. Okay. Also, it's definitely hard for me because now we're getting into more of what happened to him and my emotions. And I remember this was a very dark space for me. Like when we left off at part one, we had seen it on the news. I was already starting to hear people's opinion of what happened to me. There was a lot of people who all of a sudden wanted to prophesy and tell me that the wages of sin was death. And because I was fornicating or unknowingly committing adultery, that, uh, you know, God took my baby. And so where I was already beating myself up for even being in this type of situation, it only made the guilt that much stronger. And so at this time, I'm still staying at my mom's house. This is still, I would say, I stayed at my mom for 2 weeks. Okay, so up until the funeral, and then after the funeral, I went home. So I had never been through a legal matter before, and so I didn't know that there was like all these different things you have to do when you're like a victim of a crime or something like that. So we had been to the police station the second time where they told us it was a murder and that they had Brandon in custody and that I had to identify his mugshot and all of that. Well, we have a family friend who is a and we reached out to her because obviously we wanted her to uh, do the funeral. And she let me know that they would not allow her to get the baby because he was murdered, we would have to identify him at the morgue first. And then she would be able to pick up the baby because she had tried at the hospital and they didn't let her do it. Um, I want to kind of go back to that day, that the last day that we were at the police station, and I had to do like a recording or something for court. And when I came downstairs, uh, Brandon's mother and his brother were downstairs. Because at this time, the detectives, they were trying to gather all the information that they could. So, they had us coming back multiple times just so they can get ready to build this case and, prove that he was guilty, get justice for Bryson. When I came down, she was crying. Her eyes were bloodshot red. And it was in that moment that I realized that not only did he take my child away, but she lost her son that day. And I'm sure that she was going through the same mental battle that I was of, what, like, where did this come from? Like, you know, and hurt me would have just walked past her and hated her. And, but how could I? How could I, when we both were kind of sitting in this situation, hurting? And so I hugged her and she hugged me. And I told her, she will always be my son's grandmother. And I let them know that I will let them know about any funeral uh, arrangements moving forward. And she just looked at me and she said, "I'm so sorry." And I took that for what I needed it to be from their end of it. And let me also say this, even though I'm being very honest and transparent in this podcast, y'all, in no shape or form should y'all be trying to find these people and talk to them and bully them or whatever people do on social media. Like, let's not do that. Okay. Don't damage my son's name with that. So back to going to the morgue. I didn't know what to experience and what it was going to be like. I mean, we watch scary movies and you think you go into this place and the lights is flashing and all that, and it's nothing like that. And at this time, my grandmother and her church had came back from out of town. And so my cousin, who is a bishop, he had been calling to check up on me. And he let me know, "Hey, when you have to go, let me know and I'll meet you there." And I said, "Okay." Mind you, I had to get my drink in first. I wasn't even sleeping at this point. I was drinking myself to pass out and then waking up and drinking again to make it through the day. One day I will have my best friend on here because she would come to my mom's house and cook breakfast and, try to get me to eat, try to get me to get in the shower. And I wasn't feeling none of that. I was like, give me a cup and the 1800 and I'm going to be good so we could go do what we got to do. At this point, also mentally, things were starting to like unravel. I was blacking out, not being able to stay focused in a conversation, having nightmares, hearing babies scream. When I would walk into a store or anywhere that was public, I would feel like I was hearing voices, like people were talking about me, and I would have to focus in on the conversation to realize that it had nothing to do with me. And so I'm a mess. That's the only way that I can describe it, is I'm a mess. So we get ready to go to the morgue and they sit me down and they let me know, "Hey, we're going to show you the baby on the screen. Okay. We will keep the screen facing you for as long as you need. But once you identify him, we will turn the screen away and we will not return it again." So basically, once I say, "Yes, that's my son," they're not going to turn it around for me to sit there and look at him. And I was kind of disappointed because I wanted to hold my child. Like I wanted to see him physically in front of me. And because I hadn't seen him since when me and his father had went to Buffalo Wild Wings and he left. And so they turned the screen around and my cousin and the bishop had met me there. And yeah, they had the sheet pulled up to right here. And the lady explained to me that, hey, we're going to cover him because, uh, after the autopsy and all that, they didn't want me to see him cut up. And so when they turned the screen around, I could still see rings around his neck. He was obviously blue. His lips were pursed up like he had been crying. And you could see dried up blood here, a little dash here. Um, so they asked me, was this Bryson? And I said yes. And again, the screams just started coming out. At this point, it seemed like, even though I had been told numerous of times, over and over again, that my baby had been murdered, every time somebody said it to me, or every time I had to do something that had to do with this situation, it was like hearing it for the first time over and over and over again. So my cousin and my family basically had to carry me out the morgue. And now I need a drink because I just saw my deceased baby bruised up, which I don't know if I thought that something was going to happen that was going to prove these people wrong, right? It was going to prove the police wrong, that he didn't murder my baby, that it wasn't anything violent, but it was the proof and seeing bruises on my son and not even knowing the extent of the bruises that just made it even more real that this is happening. This happened. This is real. So, of course, um, the the I'm sorry, the funeral director goes and she picks up the baby. She lets us know, hey, I will call you guys when you can meet me at the funeral home and we can go over everything. Just let me assess, the baby and everything once she picked him up. So she kept me in the loop about what was going on. At the time, she had promised, hey, I will let you hold him. I understand. I will let you touch him. Just let me assess the situation. So I was kind of glad that she was a family friend because I felt like she really understood like my need to hold this baby. So in between time, again, people are still calling, giving their prophecies and words from the Lord and their revelations as to why this happened to me. And let me put this out there. Do I believe that people had ill intent in the things that they said? No. I believe that it is part of church culture that we try to get a revelation out of every situation, and we feel the need that the Lord laid this on our hearts to give to other people. But there is a time and a season. And the first week of me dealing with my son being gone, the end of this relationship, going back and forth to the police station, detectives calling all the time, the state's attorney is now calling, going to the morgue, going to the funeral home. This is not the time for that. What I could have respected more was if people had just said, I'm sorry for your loss. I'm praying for you. Are you okay? But I forgive those people. At the time, I hated it. I had a lot of gripes with people. a lot of beef with people for the comments and things that were said at the time. Um, I had people reach out to my grandmother and ask her what I was going to do with the baby's clothes. Could I donate them? He wasn't even in the ground. He wasn't even in the ground. And people were asking me for my baby stuff. And I'm telling you this information because I also want us to look at when people are going through things in our life. Can we be a little insensitive sometimes? Because you're not feeling the bulk of it. You may feel sorry for me, but you're not experiencing it. And so you kind of lose your sensitivity in the things that you're asking for. At that time, Bryson's stuff was still sitting on the table at my grandmother's house the same way the police gave it to me. So whatever milk Brandon had in that bottle, it was still sitting there. His shirt that Brandon had changed him into had a little throw up and blood on it. I kept it just like that. So no, at the moment I was not in a place to even consider giving his things away. And so the days are going by. I'm still drinking. I'm still having blackouts. We had to go to the Social Security office to get a death certificate. The detectives were calling and telling me I needed to go to the hospital because we needed to prove that Bryson was a healthy baby, due to the 6 reasons that Brandon had gave as to how the baby could have possibly died. And so when I would go into those places again, because it had been on the news, when I go to the desk and I say, this is why I'm here, and I say the baby's name and they go, I instantly start like freaking out on the inside. Like I feel myself getting ready to cry. I really want to just turn around and run out. And I'm panicking and I can feel myself getting short of breath because I feel like everybody's talking about this situation. And their reaction to it only let me know that they had some details of what I was going through and maybe they had an opinion about me, or, I felt like I could have dealt with it better had it not been so public. So we have the funeral. I have the obituary, which I actually do want to show you guys. So this was the original obituary, and it was beautiful. The funeral was beautiful. I appreciate everybody who showed up. But let me go back. I'm sorry. So the funeral home director, when we went to go and see Bryson and go over all the details of the funeral, I was upset with her because originally she had said, I'm gonna let you hold him. And when we got there, she would let me see him, but she wouldn't let me hold him. And I was telling my mom, like, why would she tell me that? Like, I just want to hold my baby. I don't care like what, how his body is or anything. I just want to hold him. And she explained to my mom that because of how many injuries Bryson had when they did the autopsy, he was basically like they do the frogs and stuff in school. That's how he was sliced up. And she didn't want me to be able to feel all of that while holding him. So really she was protecting me, and I appreciate her for that now. But then I didn't understand it. So we had the funeral. People came. We also had to have a police officer there in the parking lot because I just wasn't sure if, Brandon's family was going to retaliate against me or, anything like that. And so the funeral was well. Obviously, people still had opinions because Brandon's name was in the obituary and so was his family. But I felt at the time that I needed to state the truth, the facts. It didn't say, he leaves behind his loving father. It just said, his father was. And so the preacher was preaching, and he talked about, like, you're going to have to give praise unto God so that you can have the strength to make it through this. And the service got high and it was really good. And I gave God a dance, because that's what we're taught, to praise him through whatever we're going through so that it can strengthen us. And after the funeral, someone says, well, why would she be shouting and her baby was murdered? And this didn't even come from anybody there that was not a believer. This came from a believer. And so here's more of, I can't do anything right, that is going on in my mind. I'm a horrible mother. I'm a horrible person. I shouted at my baby's funeral. I got PTSD now. I'm an alcoholic. I'm drinking. I got to go back and forth to court. I'm just a mess. A mess. So once we buried him, and I kids have returned, I would go to the cemetery every day. I would go and I would talk to him every day at the cemetery. I would sit there and I would cry, and because I didn't know how to release this feeling. Like, how do I cope with the fact that my baby is no longer here? I remember just always feeling like I needed to tell my baby I was sorry. And I was sorry for him having to experience something like that at the hands of somebody that I trusted. I felt like my baby blamed me, like he would have been looking for me and I was nowhere to be found. And I struggled with this for a long time. And eventually, the pastor of the church that I had joined, he called, and I was telling him about it. And I said, I keep dreaming that Bryson is, crying for me while he's being abused or whatever was happening. And he hates me. And so he also gave me a comfort in knowing that, when we say we're going to heaven to be like God, to be with God, that our way of thinking and our thoughts are not that of this earth. It is like a spiritual being. And so, if anything, Bryson is praying for his mother. He's at the feet of God asking him to comfort his mother. And so I took that with me, and it kind of helped me deal with the grief. I believe that the situation had to play out the way that it did. I honestly believe 8 years later that had God not allowed Brandon to do what he did, he would have, in some way, shape, or form, killed me. Even though taking my baby pretty much killed the person that I was. But I mean, physically taking me out of this world, because the truth is he was living a double life. And though I deal with the consequences of the emotions and the aftermath of what happens, I have now, and it's taken me 8 years to do so, have a slight understanding of, okay, I understand now. You allowed it, but you've carried me through. So let's talk about this, because I don't want to get overly emotional. So the detectives are calling me all the time because they're, again, like I said, they're trying to piece together everything that happened, because this is so random, because you two were in a relationship, and how did we get here? So They would come to my grandmother's house. They would ask, like, do you know around about what time you were at Buffalo Wild Wings? They even went and got the video of us because they wanted to make sure, like, were we arguing? Did we look like we was into it, or whatever the case may be? So, um, another part that happened was I also got a call from social services, child protective services. And so that freaked me out because I'm like, they finna take my kids, like, and it wasn't about that. They just wanted to make sure that he hadn't been abusing my other children. And because it was a child in the case, they also had to give a referral of what they think the sentencing would be for Brandon to the state. So it's all of these intricate parts in it that gets us to the point where, you go to trial or whatever. Now, I thought this is a one and done because the proof, you have the proof. He called, he had the baby, you know, he's pretty much giving you lies about what happened. Um, and nobody's nobody's saying anything like what's the process, why we still going back and forth, and they canceling this court date to extend to another. So it took us 2 years to get to trial. So he was arrested that day, June 4th, 2016, and we didn't go to trial until September of 2018. Yeah, it would have been 2018. So that in itself had me feeling like anxious because I wanted him to go to jail. I wanted my baby to get justice. And I just kept feeling like these people don't care about my baby. Like, I'm hurting. Like, what if they let him out? I was just going through all of the different emotions with that. Now, while I was going through this process, the state has a program called Chicago Survivors. And so they come out and they send a person out to talk and like grief counseling, kind of like, and they're just a support system. So they would buy the kids toys and stuff like that. And we would talk. And I was having a hard time letting go of the relationship because I had separated the two. To me, I did not know who this man was who could have possibly killed my child. All I could remember and envision was all the times we would go on dates and all the experiences that we've had, our phone conversations. Mind you, my phone is full of pictures of us, and he had bought me like this promise ring, and I was still wearing it, and she was very vital in helping me put the two together because she knew you're separating it and we need you to get to the reality of the situation. So while we were talking, she had me, mental health issues such as like people being sociopaths, so that I can get an understanding of how someone could be in a relationship with you and do things as what was done to me. And that's because they become whatever you need them to be. The goal is to have you under their control, their spell. That it's like a sport for them. So whatever you need them to be, that's what they become, so that you will fall for them. And when they mess up, they'll cry. They'll kind of like what I talked about in episode 1. When you're dealing with a toxic person, they mess up, they cheat on you, and then tell you, I'm gonna kill myself. Like, it's manipulation. And so I'm trying to, I'm in church and visiting, and even that was difficult for me because sitting in the church, mind you, I'm still having an issue with being in public. Um, I can't handle being around all of these people. Um, I would sit on the front row or like the second to the front row because that way I didn't feel like I was in the middle of a crowd. But the moment somebody's baby would start crying or anything like that, I would just space out. In the middle of him, the pastor preaching, I would be somewhere completely different. And so the lady from Chicago Survivors and my best friend were trying to teach me ways to keep my brain focused on what we're doing at the moment. I'm still not able to drive. No one's allowing me to drive, and I'm still drinking. I'm still drinking. That's my daily dose to get me through the day. Um, People would come to the house and, visit me and try to talk to me. And I could be having a good conversation with them. We could be talking about shoes, anything. Like everybody wasn't coming to just talk about, the obvious, and my brain would just space out. I couldn't focus, and I could see them talking and I would try to focus, and I couldn't. So it would make me cry because I'm like, this is not me. Like, what's wrong with me? I'm a social person, and this thing is totally turning my whole personality into like this scared, anxious person. And it was rough. It was rough. It was rough for me. So obviously I'm trying to heal in this span of 2 years before we get to trial, and I'm getting more and more information about what happened to Bryson. And so if there is somebody in the room, trigger warning if it's too much. So in the process of them doing all of their investigations, Bryson's injuries, according to the medical examiner, were similar to if the baby had been riding in a car with no seatbelt on and a semi truck hit the car. That's how extensive his injuries were. Now, mind you, Bryson was not in a car accident. He was at someone's house. And so I couldn't imagine like how did this night play out? That's why I always say, like, I have so many questions, and it's not because I want to hear I'm sorry. It's just because, like, why? Not that you should have killed the baby anyway, but I'm saying, like, you had no grace. You had no mercy. Even if you were trying to cover, your double life, like, you did so in such an inhumane way that every detail of this story is like crushing, you know. Um, and so hearing that, and then them coming back to tell me like, hey, they found hemorrhaging here, they found hemorrhaging there. Brandon is still keeping up with this story that the baby was sitting in his car seat and rolled out the car seat. Well, a 2-month-old can't roll, so that wasn't true. He said he accidentally dropped him and the baby hit the gaming system. Still doesn't explain his injuries. They talked about how even he said he stepped out and had a cigarette, and so the baby must have rolled off the bed, and that didn't match. And so it was aggravating me to the point where I hated this man, because why won't you just tell the truth? Why take me through all of this? You did it. Why not just say, hey, this is what happened and this is why I did it. Lock me up. I think people think that I grieve because I lost my son, and I grieved because not only did I lose him, but it was torture going through the process of trying to get justice for him and hearing details. And it was still coming on the news. And then if I typed my baby's name in Google, you see all the platforms that have my baby's picture on it, talking about it. It's on Facebook. People keep calling me about it, and I'm still having to be a mother to my other three children. I'm still hearing people's opinions. I'm life still goes on, so I still got bills. I got to get back to work. It was literal torture. And so now 8 years later, I think about, it's even hard when I'm telling you about it, because it's hard to go back and imagine that girl, because I've come so far from that space. But she was broken. She was definitely broken. Whatever childhood hadn't done, whatever relationship hurt hadn't done, that situation, what they say is the straw that broke the camel's back. It was definitely my brick wall. Um, and so trying to heal, I, had things where I would keep earphones in my ears so I can listen to music. So that when my brain was spaced out, I could have something to focus on so that I can try to have conversations. I moved out of my grandmother's house because I could not stay there any longer. The memories of the baby being there, and it was just not a healthy space for me. And so I moved uh, maybe about 35 minutes away from Chicago so that me and my children can start over. And I thought that it was gonna be better, but it eventually, not realizing it self-consciously, I was not being a good mother to my children. I was neglecting them, not in the sense of like I wasn't providing for them, because obviously I had to go back to work. I would drop them off at school, I would feed them, but how mommy was so loving and hugging and sitting and having junk food picnics, we were no longer doing that because I needed to function. And so I would come home, make sure they do their homework, get my liquor and my food, go in my room and close the door. Get up in the morning, get them dressed, take them to school, and do the same thing all over again. And we will get into how this situation affected my children. Here now, we are working on breaking generational curses. We're working on trying to heal my children from even how they experienced their mother in that time. And people always say, like, Keita, you're so strong. And, I don't know, guys. I don't know how I made it to this point. I know that definitely it was by the grace of God, but I can't tell you how each day I made it through that. I wanted to die. I wanted to commit suicide. I thought that my children would be better off. I thought that, my family would be better off because I brought this shame to them. And it's crazy how, and I'm gonna let y'all go, but it's crazy how mental health works, like how your brain works, because you're grieving the loss of a child, but you're also having guilt. You're also dealing with regular life stresses. And then something in your brain clicks and says, you remember how your dad wasn't there for you? Do you remember how you wanted a relationship with your uncles and they had love for everyone else but you? You remember how you felt like you was ugly all your life? Mm-hmm. See, this is what you do. And this is like how my brain, this, I'm staying up all night because this is how my brain is working. This is what you do. You sleep with men, they play you, and look, you're an embarrassment. You're a shame to the family and to the church. You remember how you felt when you had your other three kids and that relationship didn't work? And you here raising them by yourself, they gonna grow up messed up. Like, this is how my mind was like, just trying to play tricks on me. And so I understand why people have substance abuse problems, because just for a moment you can shut that noise up. And all of this I am going through while still going to church. And I'm now in this new church and I'm loving it because the people are loving on me. But now I'm in the praise team and I'm leading praise and worship. And though people are saying I am so anointed when I am up there, I it is a battle. It is a battle. It is literally me just trying to enjoy the presence of God, because I know when I come down off of this podium and I get in my car and I go home, those voices are going to start all over again. Mental health is real. And if you get nothing else from this podcast, I want you to have grace. Have grace for people. Stop thinking people are so strong, and because you see them laughing and joking that everything is fine and they're doing good, because it's what people are going through when they're at home alone. That is the struggle. So we will get back to this. I just really wanted to make sure that we were closing the ends with the first 48 hours of what happened. There will be additional episodes regarding this, because we do have to talk about my experience with trial and all of that, how it affected me mentally. But I am going to give y'all a small break from Bryson, because I know that it can be heavy. I know you can probably hear it in my voice. It is very heavy to even talk about. Now, it doesn't put me in a dark space like it used to, but having to relive some things, even to help others, it can be an emotional experience, and it can be tough. So don't forget to join me here next week. We have a special guest. That episode, I believe, is called Birth and Grief, and our special guest is going to be Nicole Mixon. So I hope that you guys tune in to that. Again, if you have any questions, if you want to support, if you want to be a part of the podcast, contact me at the Bryson Holman Foundation at gmail.com. I would love to hear from you guys, even if it's just you sending an encouraging word. I appreciate that. Also, I do sponsorships. So if you have a small business and you would like me to promote that business on this platform, please email me, and we can go over whatever is needed for me to do so. I do have my daughter, Jayla, who is a published author. She also owns Unhappy Books Publishing, LLC. Her book is called Looking in the Mirror. It is available on Amazon. And she has been an inspiration to young girls and young women, and also her mommy. And so I have been in the works of writing my book, which I'm hoping everything will be done by November. It will be available on Amazon, and that is going to be called Filling Voids. I am almost done in the editing process. However, every time I go over my book and I reread it, there's always other information I want to tell. So I got to get that just can't tell it all mentality out. Also, if you are a preacher, a speaker, if you are having a baby, you're having a wedding, and you need help with your event coordination, if you need help with all of the artifacts, all the decorations, I got a girl for you. Her name is Nicole Mixon. She is also our guest for next week. She is the owner of B.A.B.Y Creations. Okay, here's her information here. She does absolutely beautiful work. She does also life-sized props for people. I know there was a minister who did um, a message about being bound in jail, and she literally created a life-size jail cell. Like, it looked so real. So she is very dope at what she do. Please follow her. I believe she is on TikTok under the same name, and she is on Facebook as Be Inspired Creations. I thank y'all for joining me. I thank y'all for sitting here and listening. I know it can be draining, and I promise every episode is not going to have you in your feelings or make you sad. But the fact of the matter is that this is why this podcast was created, because there are conversations that need to be had. There are stories that need to be told. And the reason why some of us won't heal or go through the healing journey, because it is very uncomfortable to hear. It is a very hard pill to swallow. And so if I can be a help, as I say all the time, by telling my tea, then so be it. Thank you for joining. I appreciate all of y'all. Keep engaging with the content. I will see y'all this time again next week, Tuesday at 5 p.m. Central Standard Time on Facebook and YouTube. Uh, that's all I got for y'all today. All right. I love you. And remember, be healed.